It's rarely ever about what song people are singing. It's rarely even about how people are singing. It's mostly about how they walk into the room. There's being competent with your skills, but you have to convey connection and warmth all at the same time. Those first 10 seconds of singing are kind of the final confirmation of an impression we've already had.
You can create a fulfilling life as an actor.
We know how hard it can be to pursue your dreams. There's no roadmap to success in our industry, which is why we're here for you.
I'm Cynthia Cortman-Westfall, a Broadway music director, voice coach, and chair of the musical theater department at the University of Michigan.
And I'm Chelsea Wilson, a performer turned voice teacher to Broadway stars and vocal coach on Broadway, off-Broadway, and touring productions. We wear a lot of hats, but you can consider us your two-woman hype team.
Whether you're a Broadway pro, a community theater regular, or a young artist with big dreams, Broadway Vocal Coach is the place for you.
Welcome to the Broadway Vocal Coach podcast, where we help musical theater performers create fulfilling lives and take the next step in their careers.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the BBC podcast. I am here flying solo today, but with a really good friend of mine, Matthew Antonio Perri. I'm so excited for you to meet him. He is one of my dear friends, and buckle up because he's hilarious and irreverent and most certainly will drop an obscenity here and there within this podcast. So get ready. But I wanted to share a few of his credits with you. Fun fact, we actually first met, oh my gosh, maybe 25 years ago when I was associate music director on a production of Carousel in New York, and Matt was playing Mr. Snow. He is a gorgeous singer, beautiful actor, but actually pivoted pretty quickly into music directing because he's also an incredible pianist and a spectacular conductor. So he has worked on about 15 Broadway shows, I think, but I want to just highlight a few of them. Most recently, he just made his Carnegie Hall debut with the concert and live recording of Austin's Pride. And his Broadway credits include Bandstand, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, The Drowsy Chaperone, Promises, Promises. He's also worked on NBC's The Sound of Music Live and Peter Pan Live, and has also made multiple appearances on ABC's The View, where he was a staff songwriter, y'all. On top of that, he collaborates with a lot of big stars in their concert work like Bette Midler, Kristen Chenoweth, Jessica Voss, Keisha Lewis, and Mario Cantone. He just kind of does it all. And so as I've been completing my online course, Pop Rock Essentials for musical theater, I was thinking of who are the music directors so I just would really love to get in the nitty-gritty about this kind of thing and talk about some pop rock music, and Matt Perri was top on my list. So I'm super excited for you to hear from him and to hear our discussion all about pop rock music. So let's get into it. Matt Perri, my beloved friend, I'm so happy you're here. Thank you so much for being here.
You know I'll do anything you say. Come on.
So, Matt, we are going to be talking a lot today about rock pop music. As you know, I just am completing this course that I wrote, an online course called Pop Rock Essentials, Musical Theater Audition, and I've always been really obsessed with pop rock music in general. I love it. I love it. I love it so much. I also love theater so much, and I find the marriage of these two really fascinating, endlessly interesting, really hard to pin down. And so we're going to get your thoughts on that today.
Yeah. Do you know, it's interesting that you say that because if I'm being blunt and honest.
As you always are.
Yes.
If you don't know Matt Perri, you're about to get to know him.
Well, you know, I love both of them separately. I sometimes struggle with the two of them together.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do. I mean, I think I do. I just find it interesting to figure out. It feels like a puzzle or like a code that you have to crack sometimes, and I like to get in that nitty-gritty and try to figure it out.
Yeah, I think because of what makes for good pop rock, like whatever we want to call that, it's hard to name it. You know, secular, short form, groove-based music. But I mean, I think because most of the time we experience it in a recording situation, like we're hearing it from a recording, and theater we're experiencing live.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, let's reframe it another way. In my life as a music director, I often have a lot of composers come to me, and I know a lot of MDs, I'm sure you've had this happen to you too. What do people say? They say, I don't want my music to sound like theater.
Yeah.
And my response is, listen, it's a musical. The minute we enunciate a T, it's gonna sound like theater. Yeah. I don't care if we're doing, Herbie Hancock the musical. If we write lyrics to it and we're gonna enunciate a T, it's not gonna sound that hip. And because we have to understand the story. And one of the things I love about listening to pop records is I don't really have to understand it. Yeah. I can let it just flow. I remember one time I was listening to, is it Firework or Fireworks, that Katy Perry song?
I believe it's actually singular.
Firework? Okay.
I'm gonna look it up.
But I was listening to that one time in the car with my kids.
Yeah.
And, they said, did you ever feel... And at the beginning, it was just, did you ever feel... And all I heard was... I was like, this is kind of fun. And then one day...
Confirming, it is singular. Firework.
It is singular. Okay, and then one day, I heard, did you ever feel like a plastic bag? And I just went, oh, no. I didn't want to...
I didn't want to know that was what it was.
It was better when it was just... Blah, 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 and I could just... take in all the good production that was happening underneath and the feeling that gave me. But then, my theater brain started picking up on the text and what it meant. And I was like, oh, man. So that's where I'm tricky. That's when I'm always struggling when I'm having to deal with how do we balance. I mean, to the point now where, actually, do you remember when we were at camp this summer, at Kristen Chenoweth's boot camp? Mm-hmm. And I had to teach Don't Stop Believin'. Mm-hmm. And all the theater kids were struggling with no enunciated consonants.
Yeah, yep. They all wanted to enunciate, and they all wanted to use a lot of vibrato.
And it was so fun to, fake yell at them and say, no, there's no T there. Street light. Like, no, I don't want to hear it. And essentially, that's what I'm having to do all the time now when I'm in my MD life, to try and have some authentic style. And you're just always making yourself crazy. So it's an endless vortex.
Yeah, I feel like one of the key components of pop rock music in musical theater is we want it to still somehow sound authentic, whatever that means. That's a lot of things that could mean. But it also has to have believable storytelling. And that is the part of like what you were saying with Firework. There's no sort of story we have to believe. We just get to get on board with whatever vibe we're hearing, and however it washes over us and however we receive it is great. But in theater, it has to somehow be a story, and it has to be a believable story. And that's where it gets really hard.
Well, and you know what I would add, too? Depending on if you're working in the commercial theater, in terms of vocal production, it has to be sustainable. Mm-hmm. The singers have to be able to make that sound consistently. So if it's really, what my voice teacher used to say, costly singing, it's one thing if you're doing it on a record once, or if you're on some sort of arena touring schedule and it's, 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah.
But 8 times? Yikes.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I feel in theater, one of my tricks for that is that if you can pepper in like this costly singing, whether it's a little distortion, whether it's vocal fry, if you're doing it correctly, really shouldn't be too costly for you. But whatever it is, whatever the style is that's a little bit costly to the voice, there's something about the human brain that if you pepper a little bit in the beginning or throughout, you don't need it all the time. We will think you're doing it more than you are, as long as you're kind of peppering it in strategically. It's like, have you ever seen those word games where every single word is spelled colossally incorrectly, but like the first letter is correct and the last letter is correct, and then you can read a sentence and every single word is spelled wrong, but your brain fills it incorrectly? Have you seen these games?
No, but you know what you're making me think of? When I was doing Bandstand on Broadway, and Corey Cott, who played the lead, learned piano really, really well. But there were just certain jazz piano things that you can't learn in a year and a half. So, when I was playing the lead piano book, and that was a specialty of mine, like just something he was never going to get. But the optical illusion was to make sure that everyone saw him really playing the beginning. And then we would just turn it.
Yes.
And then once you saw him doing it once and you connected, oh, he's really playing, And here and there, you'd see him really doing it. And then when it was really hard, same thing you said.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
absolutely
It's
believe
very
that
similar.
he was doing
Once you take that leap and we hear it once or we hear it once or twice, our brain starts to pick it
That's
up
smart.
and fill it in. And so that's one of my tricks for making it more sustainable. When you're talking the really costly singing, it's a very strong spice. Whatever that is, you only need a little of it peppered in here and there, and we're going to pick it up.
That's it. I'm going to steal that. That's a good trick. Well done.
It's especially why in the beginnings of songs, and I do this with a lot of my students and clients, the beginning of like your first opening line, if you sing that line clean and with a consonant at the end, I've already decided you don't understand the style. If you give me a little vocal fry, if you give me a little breathiness, if you don't put that consonant on, I right from that first line, I'm like, oh, okay, understand some style. I mean, it's really interesting how in 5 seconds or less, we make a quick decision about style, and it's so small. You don't need much of that spice.
It's so true. Well, that and, even if we're starting to talk about people coming in for audition, or even just who can be brave and not start at a 10.
Yes. Well, let's talk about that one for a moment. One of my favorite things Alex Lacomar said at one point was, he's like, every audition, I feel like I'm saying, okay, great. Can you take it from a 10 to a 3? Or can you shave off 75% of what you just did?
True.
I mean, that's a huge percentage. That's not saying like, can you take it from, a 10 to an 8? No, a 10 to a 3, 100 to 25.
Well, do you know what? I also think that we probably have to acknowledge that the world has changed a bit in that everyone's looking at small screens a lot. Actually, when I was working at the Fifth Avenue, which was this gigantic house, we used to have the opposite problem. Nobody was ever big enough. They would come in and everyone used to struggle to fill that space because when they would work everywhere else, the work is tiny.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of pressure on people to be small, even in a theatrical setting. But, I think that in general, Lack is correct. Like that is just our preference now is to be more contained. And that is a tool that everyone needs to have in their tool belt.
Yeah, that's interesting about the small screen. I'm sure there's something to that. And I also think for musical theater singers, if you're going to sing If I Loved You, you're going to come out of the gate pretty strong right from the get-go. You're not going to do your most breathy version of that first 8. And I feel like a lot of times pop rock singers start at that solid mezzo forte, a 6 or a 7, and then go to a 10, as opposed to daring to get down to a 1 or a 2.
Yeah, there's this principle of making the audience come to you. I used to have a voice teacher who would say, don't reach out with your eagerness. He used to make me laugh. He was like, let them draw it in. But he was correct. What's the best example of that? Watch Aretha Franklin at the Kennedy Center at the very end of her life playing and singing Natural Woman. The fur
I've seen it. It's in the fur coat. It's phenomenal.
I've watched it so many times.
It's phenomenal.
But specifically, if you watch it from the angle of she's not begging you, she's not putting herself out to them. She puts the purse down.
She brings her purse out on stage.
Yeah.
She keeps the coat on.
Yeah.
It's amazing when she finally takes that coat off.
It's huge.
And then you're ready for it.
Yeah.
You are dying for that coat to come off at that point.
But the fact that she just is very calm and collected, and then she plays. And I think that so many people didn't realize that she could play. And she just calmly starts to destroy in this very calm way. And you just can't believe it. And then that voice comes out. And that's the thing. It's like there's all this raging skill.
Yeah.
But with this calm confidence, and you just can't help but fall over and salivate.
Yeah.
So I think like there's something really valuable for all of us to watch that, especially for people walking into rooms. In my years as a music supervisor, blah, 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 that's probably the number one thing I've coached people on, or my observation from being in audition rooms. It's rarely ever about what song people are singing. It's rarely even about how people are singing. It's mostly about how they walk into the room.
Say more about that, because yes, I agree. That's a huge part of it. In fact, I devote an entire module of the course that I wrote to confidence in the room.
Oh.
Not about the singing, not about the acting, confidence in the room. Which with this style, if you don't have, it's sort of not the style anymore. I mean, pop rock artists are inherently gutsy and subversive and
Yeah, something that I'm always talking to, some people know or don't know, I teach conductors. And so I'm always talking to my conducting students about the space between the length of the neck and the shoulder. And the other day I was watching this woman on this YouTube video, and she was talking about this scientifically, about this angle. How did she say it? There's being competent with your skills, but you have to convey connection and warmth all at the same time. Like, you can be competent, but if you're not communicating, if you're not actually connecting with people, if you're not conveying those two things, it doesn't matter how competent you are, right? But she talked about, and I was cheering watching this relationship between the head and the shoulder, as opposed to this.
Interesting.
Right? And that's something that I have obsessed over ever since I spent a year with an Alexander Technique teacher when I was 28. When I was trying to address a pianistic issue, and it turned out to have nothing to do with that. Actually taught me how to learn and what it was for my body to be neutral. But anytime I walk into a room, I started to become very aware of how I was holding myself. And it was really easy. When I was long and wide, the way that I would be perceived by everyone in that room was completely different. Because in the beginning, it was very, I had to be very conscious of it. What is that called? It's like the conscious competence. You're trying to learn something. So I was competent, but I had to be really conscious of it.
Yep.
And it was completely different. The way, so even just like the way you're holding yourself, the way you enter. I once read this book called Persuasion. I love that word. Yeah, because you're essentially setting up a persuasion before you even start, before you even open your mouth.
Oh, I love that. Persuasion.
Yeah, I forget the guy's name. I didn't come up with this. But you're doing it all the time.
Yeah.
Because, for you and I, when we sit behind a table and listen to people, I mean, those first 10 seconds of singing are kind of the final confirmation of an impression we've already had. It's a lot like dating. You're getting nonverbal cues. You're getting a gut feeling. My mom in her career taught public speaking. She always talked about that. She had a master's in communication. Most communication is not verbal. So when you're walking into a room, you're saying a lot. You're walking in. What I always notice, what I would say to actresses, don't say too much. Have a little something in reserve. And another thing, that's making me come to you instead of that reaching out with your eagerness. Because half the time, you and I would just be sitting, rapping like this. What's the number one thing that happens? A person comes into the room. Hi! Right? We've seen it a million times. Yeah. Or the song ends. Oh, sorry. The apologies come. Or there's some sort of comment. So a lot of times I would just coach people. People would say, well, what do I do in my song? How do I magically fix my voice? How do I sound like Mariah Carey? Have like, dit. Just don't say anything after you finish singing. And you're going to see your returns increase by 40%.
Yes.
Just go.
Yeah.
Hold it in. Yeah, you felt like it was a C-. It was probably a B+. Okay, I'm not saying it was an A.
Well, and you know what? A B+ can turn into a pretty solid A. I'll tell you a trick that my piano teacher taught me, who, by the way, this is not indicative of her teaching because she was a very difficult teacher. But when I would do the thing about apologize, if I had a really hard passage that I botched on the way down, as I'm botching it, I would land my conclusion even worse because it was like, well, I already botched it, so I guess forget about it. Who cares? I never will forget. The opening to the Grieg piano concerto. The
one that I used to have to play every night and how to succeed in business.
That is correct. Yes, that is correct.
I know it quite well.
So her example to me was, she said, "Listen to this passage, and you tell me what's better." And she did one that was pretty good, and then kind of landed with a peter out. And then she did one that went bam, slap, 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 no correct notes, da-da, boom, and then she landed it, and I was like, oh, that was exciting.
That is a
you can
great
forgive
example.
a multiple of sins if you nail the beginning and you finish strong and don't apologize. All of a sudden, again, we fill it in and we go, oh.
Well, I think the other thing is that I had to learn the hard way in real show business was it wasn't a matter of not tanking. It was how quickly could I recover. And the older I got and the more experienced I got, I would shorten the distance. I would shorten the time from that feeling of, ugh, to just let it go.
Yeah.
And now when I see that in other people, it's really attractive.
Yes. Yes.
My
My favorite is when someone screws up and then they start laughing and they get right back on. I love that. I just think it shows so much confidence, and ease and
grit,
competence and grit and resilience.
Yeah. Resilience. That
professionalism.
Resilience is key because you're gonna tank. You know, you're going to eat shit. I have actually an eating shit scale. That like when I have a music team, we talk about it. Like, what did you eat? Like, was it a shot glass? Was it a cup? Was it a bowl? Was it a plate? And you know, we just because we say it out loud. What'd you do?
Yeah.
Because we want to put it outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
Because it's a problem out there instead of being hidden in.
Yeah.
So when someone walks into a room and they have some ability to do that, that's who I want to work with. Because I think also you're trying to figure out, this voice teacher I studied with for forever, I remember one time he had a friend who he was a higher up at John Hancock. And this guy said, oh yeah, well, when we're training financial executives, we just have this one test you have to take, and it's the unteachables. They had developed what they thought were, here are the 25 things we can't teach you. You have to come in with whatever those skills were. I never found out what they were, but I really wanted to know, right?
Oh, I love that.
But
yeah.
As far as they were concerned, if you could score high enough on this test or quiz with the unteachables, they didn't care if you couldn't do anything else. It's like, oh, well, you don't have any other skills? We don't care. We can teach that to you.
We can teach you that, yeah.
What are the unteachables that, and I think that if we're being real, every show and every project has, I've never thought of this out loud before, but has a certain amount of, okay, listen, like if I'm talking to casting or I'm talking to the director and we're wheeling and dealing about, okay, who are the right people for this project? Really what I'm trying to tell them is like, look, here are some unteachables. Like how much rehearsal time do we have?
Yeah.
You know, what's this music like? What are your qualifications? Well, they need to be able to walk on stilts. They need to be able to convincingly do a Shakespearean soliloquy. They need to speak Chinese, and I need them to be 6'5" and be a true bass. I'm like, okay, well, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to come in and say that, well, they have to be a perfect sight reader. You know what I mean? There are all these things.
Yeah.
But I think that when people come into a room, we're just trying to figure out, all right, what's an unteachable? You've got to have it. But if I see that grit and that resilience, great, I want you. You know, I'm about to do Waitress at Fifth Avenue. And actually, in our whole casting process, there were a few times some people came up who, you know, stylistically weren't exactly what I wanted. You know, in terms of that perfect, slightly breathy singer-songwriter tone here and there, like in the company, like wasn't exactly what I wanted. But they had these other things. I'm like, I'll work on that with them.
Yep. Yeah.
I'll be able to percentage-wise get that to, in the time that we have enough. But there were some other people I said to them, no, that's gonna be too hard. Not a bad person.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I feel like people get really hitched up sometimes on thinking that, like, if they aren't sort of innately living most comfortably in the rock pop world, they feel like, well, then that's just not my thing. I can't do that. I'm musical theater. I can't sing pop rock. But I feel like it doesn't take much to show a music director that you can do enough for that music director to have confidence that they can get you to where they need you to be.
Okay, let's talk about this, okay? Because I think what people don't want to face, and just as someone who, like, I'm a person that has worked on a lot of different musical styles in my life, okay? And a lot of it just comes from listening.
Yeah.
I think that people have this idea that, okay, I don't know a musical style. Well, I'm going to get a book, or I'm going to go see a coach who will, you know, in an hour or two quickly tell me how that's going to go. That's not how that goes. People who are good at musical styles, They're good at it because they've listened to it for a long time. They've gotten that sound in their ear. So, I mean, the trick is, for anyone that's listening, if you have a certain musical style that you want to get into, you've got to find a couple of recordings that you love.
Yeah.
And then you just throw them on. I mean, if you're, if you live somewhere where you're driving, sing along. I love singing along in the car.
Yes, but here's my thing with the sing-along. This is where I get really crazy about singing along. I know a lot of folks who sing along in the "Do you ever feel like a plastic bag?" And if you want to learn to sing that style, you can't sing along like that. You have to listen and then try to emulate. I feel like people get really about like, oh, I don't want to copy, but I feel like if it's not a style that you normally use in your voice, that's a great place to start. Try to emulate. Let's try to find the breathiness of Katy Perry. Let's try to find the yodels that she does. Let's try to find those open vowels that she calls out. Let's try to find that in your voice. Let's do the vocal fry. So I feel like singing along, yes, sing along, but try to do it in the new qualities of sound so that you get those in your body and in your ear.
Okay, let me qualify.
We're gonna have a fight. We're gonna have a fight about this.
No, I think I just want to qualify something because I'm thinking of this like a musician, not as a singer, and I am a singer, so I can talk shit about singers. Okay, I'm doing that, but with active listening to what is like coming in and is coming out. Okay.
Yes.
And
if you're singing along, you might not be active listening anymore unless you're singing along very purposefully.
I'm not saying it in a way, but thank you.
We both have our finger out.
No. No, but I think first of all, it's a really good note because I think you're absolutely correct. If you're just belting over it to make yourself feel good, that's not helpful. It's sort of the difference between effective practice and just doing things that you like to do.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of it more in terms of, can you sing along in the car almost to the point where you don't even hear yourself because you're blending with it and seeing what it is to meld your voice to their voice, to match their tone almost from an academic exercise. And you're just trying to get the shapes in your mouth and get the sounds in your ear of what it is to do that.
Yeah.
And especially from a rhythmic perspective too. If you became interested in certain kinds of jazz singing, sing along with Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross. Can you really match up with where they are, or are you going to be a little ahead? Trust me, you're going to be a little ahead. You're going to be ahead because everybody rushes. That's okay. You're not a bad person. Yeah. It's just structural, right? And then the more you do it, the more you're going to understand how that lays back. And then when you're in some situation, like for example, if you were a musical theater person, last year when I was at the Fifth, we did White Christmas, right? I don't know if you've ever done White Christmas.
Mm-mm.
There's a really great 5-part quintet, close harmony in the first act. Very difficult, right? But when we were working on it, I brought in a bunch of examples from actual jazz singing to this quintet, of course.
Yeah.
Because I wanted them to hear what that sound was, away from a musical, right? But it's a rhythmic quality as much as it is tone. And and I think if we're talking about authentic, American secular singing, that's the secret sauce. It's one thing to get the tone right, but where are you in relationship to the beat? Are you center of the beat? Are you a little rushy? Are you more R&B, gospel, back of the beat, but really understanding all that subtlety? I'm going to hear that right away if you really know what you're doing. How do you know what you're doing? You just listen to it a lot.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science.
Yeah. One of my voice coaches, Tom Burke, has a great exercise that I love. It's just pulling up a song. You listen to one phrase, just one, and you pause, and then you sing it exactly like the singer so that you really hear your voice. So you hear them, then you hear you, and then you go back and you listen just to that phrase again, and you just keep going, you toggling back and forth between the phrase of the singer and you singing it until you've analyzed, do I have every bit of vocal fry? Do I have the breathiness? Do I have the flip that they do? Do I have the vowel shape that they did? Like, you just try to find these different colors and shapes in your own body, which I find so fascinating. To try to capture the sound of what some folks are doing can be endlessly fascinating. And you find that your voice can actually do a lot more than what you might have thought.
I used to sing in this a cappella octet in New York called the Accidentals back in...
I forgot about that.
Yeah. But this woman, she just died. Her name is Margaret Dorn. She was one of the best. God, she was so talented. And there was a time in New York City that, if there was a studio vocal session happening, she was on it or she was contracting it. She, along with my other friend, Emily Bindiger, were a pair that I used to do a bunch of vocal sessions with them, and you could not believe the chameleons that they were.
Wow.
So Margaret, I met on the first Bette Midler tour that I did. Margaret could sing that soul version of When a Man Loves a Woman that Bette would do, like it's nobody's business. But was very much a trained, legit soprano, knew all this choral church music, could do all these different things with her voice. So, I mean, it's just something you just don't always see all the time because these people aren't necessarily out, in the world as soloists.
Right.
But
yeah, that's why I love singers to do this kind of emulation exercise, because I feel like unless you've tried to make those sounds in your own voice and your own body, you might not even know what you're capable in terms of the colors that you can do.
Well, you know what I'm going to say too, and just from my own experience, because, I myself naturally, I'm loud in terms of, I can make a lot of sound as a singer.
Yeah.
But when I've done work doing that kind of background singing work where you're really having to blend, it feels like you're singing at 25%.
Yeah, because you
30%, because, right, you have to have so much control.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for our friends in the theater world, they're so used to hitting that back wall. Everything's always sort of, it's a dynamic range from F to triple F.
Yep.
All the time. I think we were talking about walking into rooms and not starting at 10.
Not starting, yeah. So Matt, when it comes to choosing material that you're going to sing for a pop rock show, or anytime you're asked in an audition to sing a pop rock song, what is your feeling on material? How do people choose a song? What is your feeling on the best way to choose a song? Hit us with your wisdom.
Okay, I might be a bit of a contrarian in this department because for the most part, I don't care. I would say that as long as we're in the ballpark of whatever show I'm doing, and it boggles my mind that in the age of YouTube and smartphones, people still screw this up. So if I'm conducting Carousel, then don't sing Taylor Swift. But if I'm working on Waitress, don't sing If I Loved You. That's really all I care about. Just understand what you're coming in for and the basic sounds that I need to hear and be somewhat in that vein. And then I'm going to figure out the rest.
Yeah.
I really don't care because I'm going to hear it in 10 seconds because I've been doing it for so long. And the more obscure you are, the harder it is.
Tell me more about that, because I agree. I don't care. I would pull a well-known song out for rock pop music any day of the week. But tell me why you feel that way.
Because when it's well known, then I just know it and I can focus on you, the person coming in. If it's some random tune, then I'm a nerd. And then if you're worried about what I'm thinking, I'm over at my music brains going, oh, what's this? Or what's that chord? Oh, I don't know that. Oh, that's interesting. Is that a bar of 3? My CPU is being diverted. But if I know it, I guess the danger is, here's what I would say. If you're going to do something well known, that's great. Just make sure you do it well. Don't show unnecessary weakness. Just make sure you have those top notes that I'm expecting to hear. And if you don't have them, then just do something else. Or if, I don't know, you just have to be a little careful there. If there's a normal expectation that you're going to sing something that always has that high B, and then you don't have it, maybe do something else.
Yeah.
That would be my only word of caution.
Yeah. How do you feel about taking a well-known song and sort of flipping it on its head a little bit, turning it an up-tempo into a ballad, or turning a ballad into more of a pop song, or turning it into a comedy song?
Well, I started out life as a jazzer, and I generally have a bad attitude problem. So I'm not precious with that kind of thing. I think if you do it well and you do it convincingly, I would get a kick out of it in 2 ways. One, I would probably get a kick out of it, and if someone next to me was annoyed by what you did, I would get a kick out of it even more. So I could get kind of double pleasure.
Yeah. I love it. I always feel like it's a way to show some individuality so that you aren't just doing a cover tune. And especially if you are using a song that's well done, when people do it in an interesting way, I am endlessly fascinated. I instantly think that, this to me is an unteachable. It's like, imagination, creativity, gutsiness. Love it. I'm so on board. I love when folks do that.
Yeah, I think as long as you just do it well and you have a clear vision, go for it. I mean, the worst that happens is it completely fails and everybody hates it, and then don't do it again.
But you're going to end with a strong conclusion, and you're not going to apologize when you're done.
Yeah, actually, that would probably, you would learn so much from that experience. You would learn so much more about yourself and taking a big risk than just doing something standard. Actually, that would be a good triple dog dare for any actor types that are listening to this.
Yeah.
It's just good to practice being a little risky in there, because here's what I'm going to tell you. What I find is that when I'm doing work in the musical theater and people actually have the job, people aren't very risky. I think they're always nervous about getting the next job. Mm-hmm. And people, musical theater actors in general, there's maybe been a handful over the years who are really, when I see them, they're dangerous, and I'm not sure what they're going to do next. I'll give you an example. You know who was dangerous? Vicki Clark. When we were doing Cinderella. She was like a jazz musician. I never knew what she and she would when I was conducting there, she would play ball. It was not the same. And you know what? When she's in rehearsal, she's not afraid to ask questions. She's not afraid to take up some time, and she's for real. She can really sing. And when she says something, you believe her, because she really gets into the work, and she's just not afraid. And it was so great to be around her, because it just made everyone step up.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that.
So I think when you can practice that from the first moment you're part of a process, so if there have to be auditions and it's not going to be from referral, then why not just show a little recklessness and boldness? Because it's more lacking than people realize.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think that's why anytime someone brings in something that's creative like that, I can't look away. I'm always so interested.
Yeah.
And again, even if maybe it's not exactly what it needs to be, I feel like, again, that unteachable, like, oh, I can teach them to do what I need them to do because they're already bringing in this element.
And do you know what I wish? I wish the world was different, and I wish that we could be more honest with people. And I wish that when people would do something bold, we could say to them, oh, that was so good. I really like you. You're not going to get this gig because you're 5'3", and we need someone 5'5", or whatever bullshit reason it is that I have no control over. You know what I mean? But I think sometimes people don't get that information.
Yeah.
And then it can feel like that one was a loss when it was just something. Forget about unteachable. It was like in the uncontrollable department. I wish we could just be a little more direct, so that
I know. I
some
feel
of those
like
could register as wins. Like, hey, you took a big risk and it was awesome. And hey, there's gonna be another one down the line that you're gonna be right for, and it was good. Just not this one. It's just that like I need someone with one brown eye and one hazel eye, and you're blue. Oh, shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does seem especially cruel in auditions that we don't get to give feedback in that way.
And ba-dum-bump. I wish that we had that level of directness, but not the way it is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's so hard, isn't it? So, Matt, as we wrap this lovely hour up, can you leave us with just one or two words of advice or wisdom when it comes to people, especially folks who are maybe feeling like they are a little too musical theater, that this is just not their thing? What would you say to them? I would say probably the number one thing you can do to improve is just in your listening. You need to find a few recordings of artists that you love who have voices that are like yours, that you might be able to sing, and just absorb those sounds. And because it's two things. It's the sound, but it's also rhythmic. It's a feel. And the more you listen to it and the more so it's two things, like Cynthia said. It's getting the sound separately, but it's also, I'm going to say, sing along so that you're getting some of that time feel, because you have to generate rhythm on your own. You can't always be relying on a pianist or a band. When you can be rhythmically solid on your own, that is such a strength. Yeah. It's why I included a whole lot of listening lists in my online course. Yeah, it's everything. People, what you'll find is people who it's why you have to listen. People who are good at it
That's if you were to ask them, what do you listen to? Like, oh, well, this, and this recording, and this recording, and this recording. They won't just know. Or if it's not a ton of recordings, the ones that they know.
Matt Perri, thank you so much for your time today. This was delightful.
Always a pleasure.
Pop rock singing is no longer optional for musical theater performers. It's essential. So I've developed tools for you to master this critical style with my new online course, Pop Rock Essentials Musical Theater Edition. This is a self-paced program packed with guidance to help you sound authentic, tell a believable story, and feel confident while doing it. You've got the talent and you've got the skills. Now let me show you what you need to learn in order to feel like you belong in pop rock shows and audition rooms. It's available for pre-order now at bwayvocalcoach.com/poprockessentials.